Hello, I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief of Business in Vancouver. We're pleased at BIV to present this series of podcasts this week on the future of education. The classroom for all ages, for students and instructors, is going to be much different in the pandemic. And our guests this week are going to discuss how it will be so. We thank the British Columbia Institute of Technology, BCIT, for its support of this series. And now to the conversation. Thanks for joining us today on our special BIV series this week on education, the impact of the pandemic and the direction of learning in the classroom. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief of Business in Vancouver. My guest sits atop the Tier 1 university in our city, our most prominent university actually in Western Canada, and he's just been reappointed to a second term. It's going to be a different one than much of his first 5 years. So I look forward today to my discussion with the president of University of British Columbia, Santa Ono. Thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Congratulations on the appointment.
Thank you very much.
Guess you couldn't find anything better. Is there any better job than this?
I don't think so. UBC is a great institution and its trajectory is impressive. And I've loved coming back to Vancouver, where I was born.
Yeah, exactly. You're a home. You're a native come home. When you can look back about 6 months now on how the landscape has changed, how surprised have you been at what has come to pass?
Well, the first thing I need to say is that it's really illustrated how unprepared Western civilization is for pandemics. And even UBC, that, as you know, isolated and sequenced the SARS virus genome first in the world and was instrumental in developing one of the vaccines. You would think that we would have everything taken care of as a university, as a province. And as you know, we've done pretty well relative to other metropolitan areas of similar size. And a number of cases here are much lower, even though we were one of the early cities to be affected with COVID-19. And so we've done pretty well. But as you know, we're not out of the woods yet. And there have been recent spikes in the number of cases. And we have to be ready for the winter and what might happen with the second wave then. So, I have not been surprised, but I think it's really illustrated the importance of research, the importance of our public health school, and all universities in getting it right and doing better next time around. And I think that's really an opportunity. So I'm not surprised, but I think that illustrates a part of our responsibility as a research university. I'd say to answer your question, the one thing that surprised me was how resilient and resourceful our faculty at UBC have been in transitioning essentially overnight from largely face-to-face instruction to almost completely remote in just a matter of days. And that's happening at universities around the world, as you know. But UBC did it, I think, pretty seamlessly and better than most. As you know, some institutions that have fewer resources and a shorter track record in remote and distance education weren't able to transition as easily as UBC was. So I was surprised and pleasantly surprised with how well both our faculty and staff, but also our students, have been in that transition.
I want to talk a little later on about what kind of classroom or non-classroom or remote learning that we'll have here in the near term. But I want to ask a bit of a personal question on what you feel you've been able to apply from your career and even your first 4+ years on the job during this really critical period of enormous transformation.
Well, I'd say that, it's almost now a decade that I've been a university president. I was president of another institution, a large public research university in the state of Ohio, the University of Cincinnati. And so I had already experienced significant challenges when I was there, budgetary, which we had to deal with as UBC this year, but also in terms of significant fast-breaking situations. And so that really prepared me well for the sort of shock that we've all experienced in terms of COVID-19. When you experience something in the past, you develop a thicker skin, and also you understand how to react, and you realize that people are watching how you react to a situation. And so one of the most important things to do as a leader is to appear calm and to be consultative. And to connect with all stakeholders. And I think I learned that from my past and brought that with me during this pandemic.
So I think an outsider would look at a university and say that it is very steeped in tradition. It therefore likely moves at a pace that is much more reflective, contemplative, isn't really jittery or any of that. But how do you think the functional systems of the university are changing this school year?
I think that we've learned a lot from the past several months. I think that some of it actually may result in some cost savings in terms of how we go about doing our work. One of the surprises has been that our efficiency as an institution has really increased during this time. And I'm sure you've also experienced this as the publisher of a very important um, newspaper, that that we've been surprised how efficiently we can do things remotely. And that has implications of how we use space. Space is very expensive. It's at a premium here on the Vancouver and Okanagan campuses. And so we've realized that a lot of the people that take up office space on both campuses can do just as well, even better, at home. And that has implications for their work-life balance, as well as for space utilization on campus. So I think in the months and the year ahead, we'll really take a look at our utilization of space and leverage that in terms of cost efficiencies.
What have you done so far in terms of, say, arresting some projects or any kind of development as giving you a bit of a breathing space to understand what those new needs might one day be?
Well, I think one of the good things about this situation is that it really forces us to really think about our core priorities. And as a university, teaching, research are really at the core of what we do. We also serve the province and the city in terms of healthcare. As you know, most of the healthcare providers were trained at UBC or are on staff at UBC. And so those are our top priorities. And when you have a situation like this, you really have to think about what has to happen and what is a nice to have, if you will. And so we have taken concrete steps to really focus our resources and our energies on our core priorities. And we are really looking at the bottom line to ensure that we don't move forward with very expensive projects that we might be able to delay, so that we are sure that we have the resources to support our faculty, students, and staff. So that's one of the good things that I can say has come from this pandemic.
We were talking before we started. I mean, my daughter's a scientist overseas, and she can work ostensibly from home, but she needs to have access to her university laboratory. She still needs to go in. What will you think will be the mix of students on campus doing some work at the university this fall and the rest remotely learning?
So the decisions have been made over the past couple of months. And the first thing I'll say is, in terms of research and laboratory, since you bring it up, that's a very major activity at UBC. We have about 660 million direct costs, but if you factor in all the costs with personnel, it's almost $1 billion of research a year at UBC. So we're one of the largest research universities in the world. And so we have been, research was curtailed for some time for safety reasons. We've already started to phase in a prioritized way research. We never closed down. You may know that we were the #1 university in Canada in terms of research funding for COVID. And we're doing all kinds of research from antibody therapeutics to small molecule identification to block the virus infection of cells, epithelial cells. We're also generating made in Canada N95 masks, so we're involved in PPE. So we're doing all kinds of things. That research never stopped, but we're already phasing in a prioritized way research. In terms of the actual rest of the campus, in terms of teaching, in terms of students and residents, to answer your question, much of our large classes will be delivered remotely. That's just simply because because they're large, we don't have spaces that are large enough to abide by the physical distancing requirements that are now in place. And so those large classes will have to be done remotely. Some of the smaller classes and some of the instruction that requires close interaction, not physically, but theater and music, some other programs will have a face-to-face component. So I would say that's what teaching will look like. In terms of residence halls, we will see a significant drop in the number of first-year students.
Mhm.
Some of our large first-year residences that are relatively high density, like Vanier and Totem, will not actually be open. And so the first-year students that are actually on campus will be in very modern residences such as Orchard Commons, where single occupancy per room, and that there's just one bathroom per two individuals, and they'll be observing regular hygiene and cleanliness protocols to ensure that they're safe.
Were you a little surprised that students still wanted to come to campus, even though they really can't all the time take their classes?
Well, it's actually a mixed bag. There are some students and there are some parents who don't want their children to be on campus, and so there's that group. But I'm not surprised. You know, when you survey students across Canada, as has been done, and we have focus group conversations as well with our students, both incoming and returning. I'm not surprised. It's really clear from all those surveys that students want to be on campus. It might be that they want to be away from home, but it's also that a university experience is not just receiving information. It's not just information transfer. It's actually those casual encounters that occur in departments and hallways and residence halls on campus as you're walking around with faculty, staff, and students. And that's something that you can't really replicate at a distance.
No, you can't develop your network over Zoom necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to then talk about this online learning, because I think there remains some skepticism, in the way there probably was about skepticism of working remotely, period, in this time. Do you think there will be some trade-offs for the student?
Oh, definitely. As we just finished saying, there are things that you can't replicate. But I can tell you, I'm proud of the faculty and staff and students that have been working very hard over the past several weeks and months to really be innovative about remote instruction. So it's not going to just be a PowerPoint presentation and a recording of a professor. It's going to be much more interactive. We're fortunate at UBC. We were one of the founding members of edX, so we have one of the most robust and most contemporary instructional design teams. It's actually quite large. We have studios on campus, and we've invested as an institution about $36 million in the transition. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that the instruction that is provided remotely is of the highest standard.
And how do you think the role of the instructor will change in all of this? I've been an adjunct at the university for 15 years now, and there was a time when we used to transmit our information, and it was just a received lecture of some sort. And all of that has, of course, changed in the last 15 years, where it's now much more of a discussion that takes place in the classroom. What will be the new model for the instructor?
Well, I've taught all my life for several decades, and I love it, and I miss not being able to do it on a regular basis. But I still teach classes at the institution. I try to teach in multiple faculties every year as a guest lecturer. So I still have an idea of how this will impact members of our professoriate. I think that from my experience and also talking to my fellow professors at the institution, that it's actually significantly more work. You're constantly wired. Students are increasingly contacting you at every time of the day. It used to be when there was no internet, when I taught at Johns Hopkins, that I would just hear from them during office hours. Now I get emails in the middle of the night. There is, with this Amazon kind of a culture, an expectation now that people respond immediately. So I can tell you that for the instructor, this kind of situation that might actually result in much more work than face-to-face instruction.
Yeah, I mean, I think there will be an expectation that you're available anytime and that you're capable of dealing one-to-one, and that is one of those things that will be a challenge, is to kind of keep that one-to-one relationship with students and professors. Have you got any sense yet about what the impact is going to be on university finances this year?
Well, we've modeled what might happen. We won't really know exactly what's going to happen until mid to late September. I can tell you that unlike many of our peers, UBC in terms of the numbers of applications and the numbers of students that have accepted offers, that we're at a normal level of actually outperforming previous years. So in terms of everything we can look at right now in terms of student numbers and enrollment, it's very robust. And UBC, as you know, has a pretty long waiting list as well. People who have not been accepted that are admissible. And so UBC is actually in a pretty strong position in terms of enrollment. Where we might take a hit is, as I explained, some of our first-year students won't want to come on campus. So there'll be lost revenue in terms of students paying for housing and for meal plans. And so the total amount of the financial hit, which will be in the order of, let's say, 125 to 220 million on a $3 billion budget. The exact number won't be clear until later in September.
Yeah. In terms of the universities, I think one of the great things about the university has been its aspiration to produce global citizens. It's been so clear about that for a long time. And international students play a phenomenal role in that. How much of a setback will there be this year in terms of that momentum with the international students? And does it mean that it's going to take 2 or 3 years afterward to perhaps recapture that level that you want?
There'll certainly be an impact. And I say that not only as president of UBC, but also a member of the board of Fulbright. We're all scrambling, thinking about how to provide that experience when students actually cannot study abroad. And it's a damper on what the former Governor General David Johnston, he struck a committee, I was on it, to try to increase the number of Canadian university students actually having an international experience and vice versa, welcoming international students either for a degree or for some short period of time onto our campuses. So that was really part of the plan. It was a good plan. And as you say, it's really focused on global citizenship. So there will be a setback. There will be fewer students who can do that. That being said, UBC is really being a leader in thinking about something called the global virtual classroom. Mm-hmm. And so we're part of international consortia that are thinking about delivering classes between partner international universities involving professors from multiple international universities to co-teach certain courses. So UBC is really being a pioneer in the concept of a global virtual classroom. It won't be exactly the same. It won't be like you're in Pisa and you can see the Leaning Tower, or you're in Tokyo and you can see the Imperial Gardens. You can do that virtually, but it's not the same.
Yeah. The human psyche is such an unusual creature. Does all this last until there's a vaccine?
Well, many, many universities at UBC and around the world, as you know, hundreds of thousands of actually laboratories, but hundreds of vaccines are under clinical trials right now, some in phase 3. And so there's guarded optimism that perhaps at the end of this year or early in Q1 that there will be a vaccine. But the one thing that people have to realize is that it's very unlikely that that will be made available to everyone broadly. And there will have to be a prioritization as to who gets vaccinated first. And even with a vaccine that has gone through phase 3 clinical trials, it's not yet clear how robust that will be and how long the immunity will last in a vaccinated individual. So there's a lot of question marks. And so I don't think we will be out of the woods in a year. It'll be probably a couple of years. And so we're in for this physical distancing and wearing masks when in crowded indoor spaces. All that, we're going to have to live that for some time. And we're going to have to work remotely for some period of time. So we won't be out of the woods for some period of time.
A couple of last questions. And obviously you can see what's taking place with governments providing fiscal support to individuals, to companies, obviously even to, and providing a lot more development research funds into the post-secondary field in order to basically, help the science around COVID. But I wonder what you think will have to change in terms of the relationship of the university to provincial funding, when it's apparent that at some point governments have got to stop that flow and find a way to even reverse it a little.
Well, I'm very, very grateful for the robust and unwavering support of our Minister, Melanie Mark, and our Premier in post-secondary in BC. And we are in regular conversations about, yes, how to think about our partnership. I think the future, the restart of the BC economy is going to really require universities doing even more, rolling up their sleeves and thinking about their role in talent and in providing talent for businesses, for each of the different professions. And I think that through our membership in organizations such as the Business Higher Education Roundtable, that UBC will be very much part of that new paradigm of partnership between government, between industry, and universities. Universities, I should say, however, have to be places where fundamental inquiry and research occurs. As you know, those vaccines that we're so dependent upon require universities such as UBC and Johns Hopkins, Imperial, Harvard, doing fundamental research. Only in understanding the immune system can you develop new responses to viruses that are very tricky. And so it's really important for me as president of UBC to say, yes, we have to think about different ways to partner. But it's very important for me as president of UBC to articulate the importance of fundamental inquiry, because that's the foundation for the cures that all of society need.
So what I hear you saying is that you want to resist a little bit of the pressure for kind of a commercial model to much more emerge at a university. And it also sounds like you're not as worried as perhaps some might be that provincial funding in particular might wither a little bit.
We've had very, very honest and transparent conversations with the Premier, the Deputy Premier, with the Minister for Advanced Education. And I presented in front of budget hearing committees. And I got to tell you that the province here, the provincial government, really understands the importance of education, the post-secondary sector. We're very grateful for that. I'm not going to say I'm going to resist anything. I'm just going to simply, for the good of British Columbians, for civilization, it's really important not to shortchange innovation, because it's on that innovation that the prosperity of this province and of British Columbians depends. And it's my responsibility to say so. It's also my responsibility, as you've heard me say, on things such as CBC ideas, that some people might say, what's the importance of humanities and social sciences? Well, I argue that teaching ethics, the importance of social good, is incredibly important, because we're educating the future leaders of this nation and other nations. And the decisions that they make will have significant consequences for peace and justice in this world for years to come. So that has to continue at universities.
Last point, and you may not want to speculate on this, but we have nearly 24 degree granting institutions in this province. Would we expect naturally for there to be a bit of a shakeout as a result of the pandemic on which ones are going to flourish and which ones are going to suffer a little bit? Which courses might be eliminated and faculties that would have to be rolled in certain cases? Is there a restructuring, you think, about to take place?
Well, it's something that's not new. As you know, our Okanagan campus was a different institution, and it became part of UBC, and I think it's been a tremendous success. I'm not advocating for more of that, but that's really a provincial decision for advanced education. UBC really cares about the province. We want to be part of the future, of thinking about the future, and we will do everything we can to support the Premier, the Deputy Premier, the Minister for Advanced Education, and this province. So we'll be active participants in any dialogue that comes forward.
I see you online with your cello every other day or so. You've probably gone through much of your repertoire now. What else?
I have more coming.
Oh, you have more coming. Okay, good. What else are you doing to keep yourself sane here?
Well, one of the blessings, I would say, has been that I get to spend more time with my wife. We just celebrated our 31st anniversary.
Okay.
and with my kids. A lot of families are back together again because their university students are back at home, and they get on each other's nerves every now and then. But I count it as a blessing, and that's been one of the silver linings of the past several months, is spending more time with my wife and my family.
Well, maybe by staying another 5 years, you get to see a Stanley Cup in Vancouver too. Who knows?
They're doing pretty well. Who knows?
Yeah. Good to see you. Thanks a lot for your time today, Santa Ono.
Thank you very much. All the best.
Santa Ono is the president of University of British Columbia. You've been watching our special series on education this week at Business in Vancouver. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief. We'll see you again.